By 800 CE, Scandinavian Vikings used the Dnieper and Volga rivers for their own conveniences of transporting goods. This opened up the opportunity for the Vikings to settle. These Viking settler tribes would later be the foundation of Russian nation, the Rus. Go figure. The Rus developed trade down the Dnieper rivers, meaning more food, connections, surplus, scutely pooping, and prosperity. This would later help evolve the civilization into becoming more centralized, because in 882, a Viking leader, Oleg, established Kiev, the first Russian city. With all the influences from the steppes and Byzantium and long-term settlement, the Vikings in Kiev slowly became new and different. They became Russians. Most notably, in 980, Vladimir proclaimed himself Prince of Russia, captured Kiev, and centralized Greek Orthodoxy as the main religion. In the next generation, Vladimir's son, Yaroslav, officially establishes Russia, with Kiev as the capital. He ruled with a codification of laws, just like Justinian, and modeled Kiev after Constantinople, not Istanbul. Anyway, he and his descendants ruled quite peacefully until 1100, where cousins of the line were fighting each other for succession. Kiev then loses its place as a capital city because of this. As Kiev weakened, they became open targets for nomadic groups, the Kipchak Turks, and of course, let's not forget about the Mongols. In 1200, Batu Khan forced the Russians to become part of the Golden Horde Empire. The princes of Russia were given free reign in their own territories as long as they paid tribute to the Mongols. One particular prince, Alexander Nevsky, was a total kiss-up towards the Mongols. He was appointed as Prince of Kiev and Vladimir as a result. This way, he strategically limited Mongol interferences in these places as much as possible. After 2 generations, Ivan III came into the throne of Moscow in 1462. Also known as Ivan the Great, he brought Russian lands under Moscow's control, and for the first time, the Grand Prince refused to pay tribute to the Golden Horde, therefore liberating Russia from the Mongols. Ivan IV succeeds his father in 1547. He claims himself the first Tsar of Russia. Not only did he hold the title of Tsar, but also terrible, the title in which he really lives up to. He was ruthless, violent, ferocious, and psychologically unstable. Just to name a few examples, he stabbed his son to death, he beat his wife till she miscarried, all of his friends never made it out of his home alive, he invented serfdom, massacred 60,000 innocent people, and tied citizens on sleighs to be pushed into the freezing waters of winter for no apparent reason. And the list just goes on and on. Ivan IV was a Robespierre of Russia. Throughout his rule, he successfully established a reign of terror. After his death, consequences of his rule launched a period called the Time of Troubles, going from 1604 to 1613. This was the epoch of severe anarchy, famine, and social turmoil. Yeah, just a total mess. But finally, after 1613, things leveled out. Ivan's great-nephew-in-law, Michael Romanov, was elected Tsar. This was the beginning of the Romanov dynasty, which continued for the next 300 years. They ruled very conservatively and focused on centralizing their power. Also, modernization wasn't a top priority for most Romanov Tsars. Peter Romanov was one of the few rulers who actually cared about it. After embarking on a grand tour of Europe, Peter the Great was fascinated by Western culture. Back in Russia, he banned traditional roles and introduced military and political reforms. Catherine the Great, who reigned after Peter, followed his reforms, therefore pushing Russia into a golden age and at the same time increased the distress in the peasantry classes, since the reforms called for more serfdom. The westernizing reforms was quite limited, however, since the Tsar did not want a middle class. A middle class would mean educated people, which was seen as a threat to the Tsar's power. Smart people were dangerous. The Tsars operated on a Marxist ideology, not capitalist. For the next century, Russia would be in turmoil and distress. First, the once upon the Decemberist revolt of 1825, where reformist military officers attempted to force the adoption of a constitutional monarchy by kicking Nicholas I out of power, which failed miserably. In 1861, Nicholas I abolished serfdom. Still, no significant change resulted from this. They go from working as a slave, technically, to, okay, I'm done, what do I do now? There was no factories or businesses they could turn to. They were at a loss, economically and socially. In 1894, Nicholas II rose into power. He was incompetent and easily persuaded. His wife, Alexandra, influenced him into making decisions based on what a shady man, Rasputin, her spiritual advisor, told her. Interestingly, the great amount of influences he had on the Tsar and Tsarina drew much suspicion towards him. Anyway, in 1905, the Russo-Japanese War left Russia humiliated and weakened. As it could get any better, World War I began soon after, weakening the nation even further. There was so much the citizens could take because in 1917, the Russian Revolution lashed out. Hungry people ain't happy people. In February of 1917, workers and soldiers rioted. Nicholas has lost all supporters, and in hopelessness he abdicated his throne and gave it to his brother, who also abdicated the throne the next day. Not surprising. In 1918 of July 17th, my birthday, the Romanov family was assassinated by the Bolshevik Party because they wanted the extermination of the Romanov line. Now, that's where the story of Anastasia comes in. In the following October, the Bolshevik Party came into power. Lenin becomes dictator and Communist Soviet Union was born. Russia, the USSR, was then desperately taken out of World War I with the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, where the USSR lost land to the Central Powers. They had no choice because they had enough troubles in their own country already. The war won't help it. In 1925, Stalin comes into power. He replaced the NEP, New Economic Policy, established by Lenin, with a 5-year plan to heavily industrialize Russia at breakneck speed, causing much death and hardship for the peasants whose lands were being collectivized, and causing a huge improvement in Russia's economic status. During World War II, the USSR gets betrayed by Hitler, and in desperation, they join the Allies. After that was all over with, the USSR enters the Cold War in 1947. Then, in 1990, because of independence and the restructuring reform, the Eastern Bloc slowly dissolved. It was country after country till it was the Soviets' turn. The Soviet Union fell in 1991.